Subscribe if you believe every woman deserves financial freedom. Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize how strong you really are. That line used to sound like something people said just to make themselves feel better. Now, I know it's the truth. My name's Rachel, I'm 47, and for almost 20 years I lived in a house that looked perfect from the outside. White porch, 2 cars in the driveway, a husband who everyone said was such a good provider. But behind closed doors, that house felt smaller and smaller, until it wasn't a home anymore. It was a cage. It started with little things. Let me handle the bills, babe. You don't need to worry about that stuff. I thought it was sweet. I thought he was being responsible. Then my debit card started getting declined at the grocery store. He said it was a mix-up with the bank. Next, I noticed he'd changed the online banking password. When I asked why, he laughed. You'd just get confused looking at all those numbers. Confused. That word stuck in my throat for years. I was a teacher. I'd paid my own rent before him, balanced my checkbook, even helped him with his student loans. But somewhere along the way, I started asking permission for everything. Gas money, haircuts, even birthday gifts for my sister. He didn't yell. He didn't hit. He controlled. Quietly. Perfectly. And people around me admired him for it. At church, they'd smile and say, "You're so lucky, Rachel. He takes such good care of you." I'd smile back, pretending my stomach wasn't twisting. The betrayal came one night when I found an envelope in the desk drawer. It was addressed to Mr. and Mrs. H, our mortgage company. Except the balance wasn't what I expected. He'd refinanced the house, our house, without telling me. My name wasn't even on the new papers. I remember my hands shaking as I held that envelope. He walked in, saw me, and just smirked. "You don't understand how these things work, honey. Let the man handle the hard stuff." That night, lying awake beside him, something inside me broke. Not the loud kind of break. The quiet kind, like a glass cracking in slow motion. I started thinking about every moment I'd said okay, when I wanted to say no. Every time I'd thanked him for crumbs. And I realized he didn't steal my freedom. I gave it to him, one sure honey at a time. That thought haunted me for weeks. Until one afternoon, while standing in line at the post office, I saw a woman in front of me fill out a money order form. She was humming to herself, confident, peaceful. And I thought, she's free. I wanted that feeling more than anything. That's the day I decided, enough. I didn't tell him. Not yet. I smiled, cooked dinner, paid compliments like usual. But inside, I started planning, quietly, secretly. Like a woman digging her way out of a locked room with a spoon. Because if he could control every penny, then I would learn how to build my own empire from scratch. You don't plan to start a secret life at 47. But when someone controls your freedom, your choices, even your thoughts, secrets become survival. After that night with the mortgage papers, I started noticing everything. The way he always filled up my gas tank for me. The way he'd stand behind me at the grocery checkout, card already in hand, like I might embarrass him if I tried to pay. Every gesture that once looked like love now felt like a leash. One morning, while he was at work, I opened the laptop he thought I didn't know the password to. It wasn't his main computer, just the old one he used for budgeting. My hands were shaking so badly, I typed the wrong password twice before getting it right. And there it was. Bank statements. Hidden accounts. Transfers I'd never seen before. He'd been sending money to an investment account, only in his name. Thousands of dollars. Every month. Meanwhile, he'd tell me we were tight on cash whenever I asked to buy new shoes. I felt like the air left the room. That wasn't just control anymore. That was theft. But instead of confronting him right then, I closed the laptop, sat on the couch, and whispered to myself, "Not yet. Not like this." That night, after he fell asleep, I searched for part-time jobs on my phone. Ones I could do quietly, without him noticing. I found a remote tutoring gig for high school English. It wasn't much, $25 an hour, but it was mine. My first paycheck came 2 weeks later. I opened a new checking account under my maiden name. When the banker asked, "Would you like to make this a joint account?" I smiled and said, "No. This one's just for me." That sentence felt like electricity. I'd teach after school hours, pretending to grade papers, in the spare room while tutoring online. Every dollar I earned, I saved. Every lesson I taught, I felt a piece of myself come back. He started noticing, of course. "Why are you on the computer so late?" "Just extra grading," I'd say. He'd nod, but I could see the suspicion in his eyes. Control doesn't die quietly. One weekend, I met my old college friend Laura for coffee. We hadn't seen each other in years. She looked me over and said, "You okay, Ratch? You look smaller somehow." And that hit me. I'd shrunk without realizing it. In my words, my posture, my laughter. I told her everything. The money, the lies, the way I'd lost myself. She squeezed my hand and said, "Then it's time to get yourself back. I know a lawyer. Quiet, discreet. She helps women like you." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what women like me meant. Broken? Scared? Dependent? No. It meant women who were done being trapped. The next week, I met the lawyer in a small office near downtown. It smelled like coffee and carpet cleaner. Her name was Jasmine. She listened without judgment, took notes, and said softly, "Rachel, you have more rights than you think. And he has no right to control your money or your life." For the first time in years, someone spoke to me like I was capable. Like I wasn't weak, just wounded. I walked out of that office with shaking hands, but a steady heart. I didn't know what the next steps would look like yet. But I knew this. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing. Control never fades quietly. When a man like my husband feels power slipping away, he doesn't ask what's wrong. He tightens his grip. It started with questions that sounded innocent. Who were you talking to? Why are you working so late? Why is the car mileage higher than usual? At first, I laughed them off. Just errands. Just papers. But inside, I felt the walls shifting, the tension building. He didn't know what I was doing yet. But he felt it. One evening, I was cooking dinner, chicken and mashed potatoes, his favorite. He walked in and tossed his phone on the counter. "Rachel, I checked our credit card. There's a new transaction from a coffee shop downtown. You hiding something?" My hands froze over the stove. That was from my meeting with Jasmine, the lawyer. I swallowed hard and said, "Just coffee with a friend." He stared at me for a long time. His voice was calm, too calm. "You've been acting strange lately. You're lucky I'm patient." That word again. Lucky. Like freedom was a gift he gave me, not a right I was born with. That night, I slept facing the window, eyes open, heart racing. It wasn't fear anymore. It was resolve. I started keeping records, photos of documents, notes about what he said, copies of messages. Jasmine had told me, "Paper trails protect you." So, I created one. Quietly, carefully. During lunch breaks at school, I'd meet her at her office. We went through everything, the house, the accounts, the hidden investments. She said, "You've got enough evidence. But Rachel, you have to be ready. Emotionally. Because men like him don't lose control gracefully." She was right. A week later, I came home to find him sitting in the dark. The only light was from the TV, frozen on a paused screen. He held my phone in his hand. "I read your messages," he said. "Who's Jasmine?" My stomach dropped. I tried to grab the phone, but he stood up, towering over me. "After everything I've done for you? You're talking to a lawyer? Are you planning something, Rachel?" My voice trembled, but I said it anyway. "Yes. I'm planning to live my own life." He laughed, a low, cold sound. "You think you can make it without me? You wouldn't last a week." I felt the words hit, but this time they didn't stay. Because deep down, I already had lasted, in secret, in silence. He stormed out that night, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. I sat on the floor, breathing, staring at the pieces of myself I'd been too afraid to gather. And for the first time in years, I didn't cry. I just whispered to the empty room. "You'll see." The next morning, I called Jasmine. "Let's file," I said. She didn't need to ask what I meant. That day, I started packing my life into boxes. Not to leave him yet, but to prepare for the day I could. Because this wasn't about escape anymore. It was about reclaiming what was mine. There's a moment in every woman's life when the fear of staying becomes greater than the fear of leaving. For me, that moment came on a Tuesday morning, at exactly 9:12 a.m. Jasmine had already prepared the paperwork. Divorce filing, financial disclosures, and a temporary protection order. All it needed was my signature. The office was quiet that day. I remember the sound of the pen scratching across the paper, my hand trembling, my heart steady. That signature wasn't just ink. It was freedom. When I stepped outside, the sunlight felt different. Like the world had cracked open a little, just for me. But I knew it wasn't over. Filing was one thing. Facing him was another. That evening, I came home early before he did. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, waiting. I didn't hide the papers. I placed them right in the center, where he couldn't miss them. When he walked in, his face shifted instantly. from confusion to disbelief to anger. "What the hell is this?" he asked, voice sharp. "My freedom," I said quietly. He slammed the papers down. "Are you out of your mind? You think you can embarrass me like this? Everyone will know you walked out on your husband." I didn't move. For years I would have apologized, tried to fix it, soften it. But not that night. "Everyone already knows what you are," I said. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't cruel. It was truth, simple, clean, undeniable. He paced, furious, muttering about money, reputation, what people will think. Then he said something that used to cut me to pieces. "You're nothing without me." I looked him dead in the eye. Maybe once. Not anymore. He froze. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. He grabbed his keys and left, slamming the door hard enough to shake the frame. I sat there, breathing, waiting for the shaking in my hands to stop. When I finally stood up, I walked to the mirror in the hallway. For the first time in years, I looked at myself, not through myself. And what I saw wasn't weak. It was a woman who'd survived something invisible. The next few days were chaos. Phone calls, emails, paperwork. He tried everything: guilt, charm, anger, silence. At one point, he even sent flowers to my school. "Let's talk," the note said. I didn't. Instead, I focused on my tutoring business. Jasmine helped me set up an LLC, Rachel Hart Learning Services. It sounded small, but to me it was the biggest thing in the world. Within a month, I had 4 steady clients. I started earning enough to pay my own rent. And the day that first payment hit my personal account, untouched, unmonitored, I cried. Not out of sadness. Out of pride. Because for the first time in decades, the money I made stayed mine. Every dollar was a step away from him. Every lesson, a reminder that I was more than what he reduced me to. One night, as I closed my laptop after a long tutoring session, I looked around my small rented apartment, plain walls, secondhand furniture, soft yellow light, and whispered, "This is mine." And I smiled, because freedom doesn't come all at once. It comes in small, steady breaths, until you realize you're finally breathing on your own. Freedom has a price, and I learned mine came with lawyers, threats, and long, sleepless nights. 2 weeks after I moved out, I got an envelope. No return address, just my name, typed neatly. Inside was a letter from his attorney, demanding an equitable division of marital assets and accusing me of financial misconduct. Financial misconduct. That was rich. The man who locked me out of our accounts was now calling me dishonest. I took the letter straight to Jasmine. She read it calmly, then smiled, the kind of smile that tells you you're not crazy. "He's trying to scare you," she said. "They always do. But you've kept records, and that's power." Power. That word felt new in my mouth. The following weeks were a blur of legal meetings and paperwork. He froze our joint account, reported my tutoring business as a hidden income source, and even tried to claim I'd taken furniture that was legally his. I hadn't. I'd left everything behind: the couch, the dishes, the memories. All I took was my car, my laptop, and my peace. Still, he found ways to sting. He'd show up at school, standing outside the gate in his truck, arms crossed, pretending he was just passing by. Colleagues whispered. One of them even said, "He looks heartbroken, Rachel. Maybe give him another chance." They didn't see the manipulation, the mask. But I did. I'd worn it for years. One night, I was sitting at my small kitchen table, staring at unpaid legal bills when my phone buzzed. A text. From him. "Come home. You belong here." I almost laughed. Belong. The word used to sound warm. Now it felt like a trap. I typed back slowly. "I don't belong to anyone." And hit send. That was the first night I slept soundly in months. Days turned into weeks. Tutoring sessions filled up. Parents referred friends. Soon, my little business wasn't so little. I rented a small office space downtown. Nothing fancy, just a single room with a window and a cheap coffee maker. But every time I turned the key in that lock, it felt like I was opening the door to my real life. Then one morning, I got a message from Jasmine. "He's agreed to mediation," she said. "He knows he's losing." I stared at my phone, the reality sinking in. For years, I thought I could never win, because he'd made me believe I wasn't capable. Now, even the system saw through him. At the mediation, he walked in wearing that same smirk, the one I used to shrink under. But I didn't shrink this time. I sat straight, spoke clearly, looked him in the eye. When his lawyer tried to paint me as an emotional woman who acted impulsively, I smiled and slid a folder across the table. Bank statements. Hidden transfers. Proof of control. His smirk faded. For once, he had nothing to say. When it was over, Jasmine leaned close and whispered, "That's the sound of a cage unlocking." I walked out of that building into the cold November air. And as I looked up at the sky, gray, quiet, endless, I realized something. He hadn't just lost control over the money. He'd lost control over me. People think freedom feels like fireworks. It doesn't. It feels like quiet mornings, and no one questioning where you're going. After the mediation, there was a strange silence in my life. No angry texts. No footsteps pacing in the hallway. No one asking how much I spent. Just stillness. At first, it scared me. I'd been under his control for so long that peace felt unnatural, like something was missing. But slowly, that stillness started to feel safe. I began building a new rhythm. Wake up. Brew coffee. Open my laptop. Teach. My students were from all over California, Texas, New York. Sometimes, between grammar lessons and essay drafts, they'd ask about life. And without realizing it, I was teaching them more than English. I was teaching them how to stand tall. One afternoon, after a lesson, a student messaged me. "Miss Rachel, you always sound strong. Were you always like this?" I stared at that question for a while. Then I typed, "No." But I learned. I started therapy that month, something Jasmine encouraged. My therapist, Diane, was a calm woman with kind eyes and a voice that never rushed me. She helped me untangle years of silence and guilt. She asked questions like, "When did you stop recognizing your own voice?" And I realized it had been long before the finances, the control, the manipulation. It began the moment I believed his version of who I was. Diane told me, healing isn't about hating him. It's about forgiving yourself for staying. That line stayed with me. Week by week, I started doing things I hadn't done in years. I went for walks by the river. I bought myself a secondhand bike and rode it on weekends. I even joined a women's small business group downtown, mostly other women who'd been through rough marriages, too. We'd meet every Thursday night in a coffee shop that smelled like cinnamon and ambition. We talked about clients, taxes, burnout, but also fear and freedom. One night, I shared my story. When I finished, one woman said quietly, "You're not just surviving, Rachel. You're setting an example." That was the first time anyone had ever said that to me. And it hit hard. The business grew faster than I expected. I hired a second tutor, a young woman named Claire, and rented a slightly bigger office. The new sign on the door read, Heart Education Group. Every morning, I'd unlock that door, switch on the lights, and whisper a quiet thank you. Because this was the life he said I could never have. And I'd built it with my own 2 hands. Then, one day, I got an email from his lawyer. A settlement offer. He wanted to end things peacefully. He was willing to split assets, surrender the house, and finalize the divorce. No more court. No more threats. Just an ending. I sat in my office staring at that email, tears in my eyes. Not because I missed him. Because I finally didn't. When I signed the last document, Jasmine smiled and said, "You did it." And I said, "No, I rebuilt it." That night, I went home, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat by the window. Outside, the city hummed softly. For the first time, I didn't feel small in it. I felt steady. Whole. I didn't expect to see him again. But life has a way of giving you one final test, just to see if you've really learned your lesson. It was a Friday afternoon, gray sky, light drizzle. I was leaving my office when I saw his truck parked across the street. For a second, I froze, the same old reflex. Then I took a deep breath and walked straight to my car. He rolled down the window. "Rachel," he said, voice softer than I remembered. "Can we talk?" Every instinct told me to keep walking. But I didn't want fear to own me anymore. So, I nodded and stood by the driver's side, careful to keep space between us. He looked tired. Older. His hair was grayer, his eyes dull. He smiled. That same charming smile that used to melt my defenses. "I heard the divorce papers are ready," he said. "I just thought, maybe we could talk before signing." I waited. He sighed. "I made mistakes. But I was just trying to protect us. You never understood how much pressure I was under." I almost laughed. "Protect us? From what? Independence?" "I understand perfectly," I said quietly. "You liked control. It made you feel safe." He frowned. "And what about you? You think this new version of you is better? You're alone, Rachel. You don't even have the house." I smiled. "I don't need the house. I have peace. And that's something you can't buy or take away." He looked down, shaking his head. "You've changed," he muttered. "No," I said. "I just stopped apologizing." The rain picked up. Drops streaked down the truck window like punctuation marks at the end of a sentence I'd been trying to finish for years. He tried again. Rachel, I can make things right. I'll put your name back on everything. We can start over. I looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time, I didn't see the man I used to love. I saw the cage. And I was already outside it. I'm not angry anymore, I said softly. But I'm done. He stared at me, waiting for me to break, to plead, to do anything familiar. But I didn't. I just turned and walked away. When I got to my car, I sat there for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding, not from fear but release. I didn't look back. Not once. That weekend, Jasmine called to confirm everything was finalized. I was officially divorced. Free. I hung up and cried. Not because I'd lost something, but because I finally understood what I'd gained. Later that night, I opened a blank notebook and wrote on the first page. This is where my life begins again. In the months that followed, my business expanded. I started hosting free workshops for women, teaching financial literacy, confidence, and self-worth. At first, only a few showed up, then a few more, until one evening, I looked around the room and saw 20 faces, all women who'd been where I once was. And I told them, you are not broken. You are rebuilding. That sentence became my mantra, because it wasn't just about money or divorce or revenge. It was about taking back my story, one truth at a time. It's strange how freedom sneaks up on you. One day you wake up and realize you didn't think about him at all. You didn't flinch at a phone buzz. You didn't brace for an argument that isn't coming. You just lived. A year had passed since the divorce. I was standing backstage at a small community event in Austin, a seminar called Women Rebuilding Wealth. The host had invited me to speak. At first, I said no. Public speaking terrified me. But she smiled and said, Rachel, your story is the message. And I realized she was right. When I walked onto that stage, the lights were warm and bright. The audience, maybe 50 women, looked up waiting. My heart pounded, but my voice came out steady. I used to believe strength meant staying quiet. I began. Now I know strength means telling the truth, even when your voice shakes. I told them about the house that looked perfect from the outside, about the passwords, the control, the slow erosion of self-worth. And then about the day I said no, not out of anger, but out of love for the woman I had almost forgotten. As I spoke, I saw heads nodding, tears glistening, hands clasped tight. By the time I finished, the room was silent, not the kind of silence that follows a speech, but the kind that follows understanding. Afterward, a woman came up to me, maybe in her 50s, trembling. She whispered, I think I'm living your part one. I held her hands and said softly, then promise me you'll stay long enough to reach your part 8. That night, back home, I made tea and sat by the same window I used to stare out of when I felt trapped. Only this time, I didn't see bars. I saw a skyline full of possibilities. My office had grown into a team of 6 tutors now. We were planning to expand into new cities. I'd even started a small scholarship fund for women rebuilding their lives. Every donation, every class, every success story, it felt like another brick in the empire I'd built behind his back. Only now it wasn't built against anyone. It was built for me. Before bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. For a long moment, I just looked, not to fix my hair or check my makeup, but to see myself. And I smiled, because the woman staring back wasn't afraid anymore. She didn't need permission. She didn't need validation. She just needed peace, and she'd earned it. I turned off the light and whispered, sometimes you have to lose everything to realize how strong you really are. And this time, I didn't just say it. I believed it.